Not all strategy games are built the same, and when it comes to a new release like Unicorn Overlord, there's going to be some mechanical differences that might shake up what you think you know about the way things work. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel.
Unicorn Overlord.
Hello everyone. If you enjoy what I do, my coverage of Unicorn Overlord, strategy RPGs, or gaming in general, as well as news, guides, let's plays, etc., a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Coming from other strategy games like Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Ogre, etc., you probably have some ideas about how leveling and character growth work. Stuff like growth rates, which determine when and how often a character will see gains in any of their stats. Or experience gain, which is typically modified on a curve. Low-level characters gain more experience if they defeat a higher-level enemy, high-level characters gain less experience for killing a lower-level enemy, etc. This is all pretty standard stuff, so I wouldn't blame you for going into Unicorn Overlord and thinking you understand how it all works. Unfortunately, you'd be wrong, and that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. First off, let's talk about how gaining experience actually works in Unicorn Overlord. At first, it functions as you'd expect. Units gain an average amount of XP when defeating enemies of their level. If they're lower level, they get more for defeating an enemy of a higher level than them, and if they're a bit higher, they get less, like we said previously. Heck, you'll notice that massively powerful level 20 God Joseph gets next to no experience because he's so high level. This is all within expectations, right? Well, there's even a ton of different weapons, shields, accessories, items, and abilities that give you percent XP increase in battle, or that just outright give you levels, or give you a bonus to the amount of XP you get when you defeat a unit. All standard stuff. The trick comes when you hit 3 or 4 levels above your enemy. Once you hit this point, even if your characters are level 10 to the enemy's 7, all your XP gains will come to a screeching halt. You can tell this is happening when you see your character's XP bar turn bright red at the end of a fight when it shows their gains. Functionally, this serves as the same kind of level cap that the Union level does in Tactics Ogre Reborn, and while you can still level very slowly, it would take so many kills against low-level enemies to do so, you're better served just moving on. You might ask, Tom, why shouldn't I just use free level items to keep powering up these units if they aren't getting any XP from battle? And I mean, you could, sure, but really all you're doing at that point is getting a small boost to your stats that you probably don't already need if you are already above the level of the enemies that you're fighting, in exchange for having to wait even longer to level normally by pushing a character's level even further past that of the enemies you're fighting and wasting valuable consumables in the process. It's just not really a worthwhile trade. So, okay, there's a cap on how high my level can get in a given area, but that's like Tactics Ogre Reborn, Tom. Not as different as you made it sound in the intro. Sure. Maybe. But now we have to talk about the real difference. For context, in most games, the class you level your characters in determines how they grow. You probably already know this, but if you don't, give a little bit of a background here. In Fire Emblem, this typically manifests as random growths, wherein every character has a certain percentage chance to have any of their stats increase, percent chances which are a mix of the character's personal growths and of the class's growths. In something like, say, Final Fantasy Tactics, this is determined solely by your class, with a character like a monk gaining far more HP than something like a black mage, for example. You probably know these percentages as growth rates, and they're pretty immutable. Outside of Fire Emblem games that let you level infinitely via second seals, or certain de-leveling tricks in Final Fantasy Tactics, once you gain your levels, your stats are pretty much locked in, and however they grew from the choices you made, you're stuck with it. But in Unicorn Overlord, there's some major changes at play that make me think the term growth rates might actually no longer describe how the system works, at least here. Instead, I think they'd be better known as stat sets, or, if you prefer, another similar term. I just like alliteration, so that's what I'm going to refer to them as from now on. On every character's status menu, you can see a bunch of information about their stats. What they currently are, some letter grades to indicate their strengths and weaknesses, and 2 descriptors of their quote-unquote growths, which the game does refer to them as. Things like all-rounder, offensive, guardian, etc. The combination of those 2 descriptors is what determines the stats a character has. Note my wording there. Not really their growths, but what they'll have. I say this because growths are actually set in Unicorn Overlord, and there are no personal growth rates. Elaine, for example, will always have the same stats for every player, every game, if you compare to players' games where he's at the same level. Lex and a generic fighter with the same stat set as him will always have the same stats at the same level. And we can see this in action with a certain special item as well. Late in the demo, people have found a secret shop that allows you to buy a mirror. When consumed, this mirror will allow you to change the appearance and the stat set of any character in the game, including uniques like Elaine. Not only is this cool for fashion purposes, but it also allows us to see how different stat sets would affect characters who are already leveled. Changing a character's stat set in this way updates their stats immediately to reflect that set, just as if you were hiring a new generic at a fort. And notably, it doesn't reset their level. If you use it on someone who's level 8, they'll stay at level 8, but just now all of their stats will suddenly be different. It's weird, but kind of cool as well. Much like being traditionally leveled, it appears that these changes will always correspond to what a generic of the same stat set would have. It's a useful tool, and could lead to some fun optimization, but for now, it's serving to highlight my point. There's no randomness to character growth in Unicorn Overlord. Once we get the game fully in our hands and to dissect it, we'll know exactly how each class will progress with each stat set, and there won't be much discussion to be had about it beyond what classes like what particular stat set, unlike something like Fire Emblem and its different classes. Well, so now we know that this is a thing, but is it good or is it bad? I don't really see a problem with it, personally. Given how Unicorn Overlord is designed, having a simpler system to cover all these different characters and all these different classes seems fine, really. It is a little odd to know that beyond availability and potentially stat bonuses from rapport, your uniques are not really any different from generics of the same class. But really, all it means is that you're free to use the cast or an army of faceless mercs, whatever you prefer. And it'll certainly be easier to keep track of everything else going on in the game if we're not constantly postulating and theorizing about ideal classes and when to level characters, who's better than who, what availability means for a character's ability to grow, etc., etc., etc. Especially given how many different ways there are to gain XP in the game, with treaties and grinding stages and apples that immediately give you a level, and characters like Joseph that you can just slap a lobby into his squad and let him slaughter everything until they're of an appropriate level, catapults that you can use to obliterate entire squads and gain massive amounts of experience in the process, doubled if you have a Valor skill active that gives doubled XP on someone, all the different equipment that gives XP bonuses. It's going to be a very different type of scenario, I think, here. It also means that the game should be far more balanced than other similar titles. If the dev team knows exactly how strong any given character or class will be at any level, they can design equipment and encounters to accommodate for that baseline much more easily. Instead of finding 1 to 3 busted classes with insane growths and wiping the game with them, or getting lucky and having one character gain a ton of stats and crushing everything, we're going to have to pay far more attention to the status of the battlefield, the formation of our units, the equipment we give them, their stamina, and overall more meta strategy, as well as our levels. And honestly, I kind of like that. I don't want every strategy game to play this way, sure. After all, finding busted classes or getting lucky and having a character that you really like pop off during a run of Fire Emblem is what makes repeated runs of those games fun. But there's something to be said for a more tightly crafted strategy experience as well, and it certainly looks like this change is going to make that happen. After all, if you're going into a stage in Cornea and the developers know exactly what classes you can have at that point in the game, what equipment you can have, what the potential stats of any given class will be, and the overall limits on your capabilities due to level, etc., they can really design whatever it is that they want. And you can really feel that when you're going through the demo of Unicorn Overlord. There are just certain stages that you can see the paths that the devs kind of want you to take and the various different tools that you have at your disposal to make that happen. And while those types of experiences do tend to exist in early game Fire Emblem or earlier in stages in Tactics Ogre or Final Fantasy Tactics, other strategy games, the further you get into the game, the more kind of wildly imbalanced things tend to wind up being, because there's just so many different potential paths that a player can go down with the way they build their characters, the way they've potentially leveled or not leveled, that the developers have to keep in mind that it is almost limiting in a way. They can't design something that's too tight and focused and difficult of an experience, because if they do, and someone hasn't used the right characters, or they got screwed on stats for the wrong characters, or they don't have the right classes available at a given moment, whatever, they could very nearly be soft locked out if they make it too tough. So things can honestly get a little too easy. And I think that's a criticism that I've seen more and more over the years as people get better and better at these games and they become more and more mainstream. With this, I think that's going to help them avoid a lot of these types of issues. And I'm very excited to see if that's accurate, and if it is, what the later game experience of Unicorn Overlord is going to be. Now, as I move into making my class guides and discussion videos, I plan to include a section talking about the stat sets that I like for each class to optimize the way they work for my preferred builds. I hope that that's something that you look forward to, because it is going to be a very important part of building out a character, whether you're customizing a unique with that special mirror, or you're just hiring a generic recruit and figuring out what stats it is that you want to give them. I want to know as well, what do you think about this change? Is it something that you're familiar with due to a similar system in another game that I may not have played? If it is, let me know, as well as what your preferred stat set is for various characters in the comments down below. Also, if there's a different way of referring to this system than stat set that you like more, let me know that as well, and maybe we can all kind of come to an agreement on what we want to call these going forward. Because again, I don't think growth rate quite fits. Growths in general don't mean to me what Unicorn Overlord seems to be doing with its stats. Maybe that's just a me thing. Let me know. Again, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you for watching. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, and remember, be good to each other. Bye now.